Her pain was silent long before anyone noticed her strength. It lived in the small spaces of her life, in the pauses between words and the way she learned to smile without letting it reach her eyes. She grew up believing that endurance was the same thing as courage, that surviving quietly was the safest way to exist. No one taught her how to ask for help, and over time, she convinced herself that needing nothing from anyone was a virtue. She learned how to swallow disappointment, how to tuck heartbreak into the back of her chest, how to keep moving even when every step felt heavy. The world saw a calm girl, dependable and composed. What it never saw was the storm she carried alone. From an early age, she understood that her voice was not something people wanted to hear. Whenever she tried to speak about what hurt, the room would shift uncomfortably, and someone would change the subject or offer advice too quickly. So she stopped explaining. She stopped naming her pain. She told herself that silence was maturity, that being low maintenance made her lovable. Over time, this belief hardened into habit. She became the one who listened, the one who fixed, the one who showed up for everyone else while quietly disappearing from her own life. Her days were full yet empty. She woke up early, worked hard, fulfilled expectations, and returned home exhausted in ways sleep never fixed. Nights were the hardest. In the dark, without distractions, the thoughts she avoided all day finally spoke. They reminded her of the dreams she had buried, the anger she never expressed, the tears she refused to cry. She would lie still, staring at the ceiling, promising herself that tomorrow would be easier, that one day things would change without her having to ask for it. People admired her resilience without understanding its cost. They called her strong because she never complained, not realizing that strength built on silence can slowly erode a person from the inside. She became invisible. In her own story, a background character in a life she was actively living. Even when she succeeded, the victories felt hollow. Even when she was praised, she felt unseen. The world clapped for the version of her that caused no trouble, while the real her remained hidden, unheard, and tired. The breaking point did not arrive dramatically. There was no single moment that shattered her. Instead, it came quietly, the way exhaustion often does. One ordinary day, she realized she could not remember the last time she felt joy without guilt. She noticed how numb she had become, how even sadness required effort now. That scared her more than pain ever had. Pain, at least, meant she was still feeling. Numbness felt like erasure. That realization followed her everywhere. At work, she caught herself staring blankly at her screen. With friends, she laughed on cue, but felt detached. Alone, she felt a heaviness she could no longer explain away. For the first time, she admitted a terrifying truth to herself. If she kept living like this, she would survive, but she would never truly live. And something inside her, small but stubborn, refused to accept that fate. Change did not come as confidence or clarity. It arrived as discomfort. She started noticing how often she said yes when she meant no, how often she apologized for things that were not her fault, how often she minimized her needs to keep the peace. These observations were painful. They forced her to confront patterns she had built to protect herself, but that now kept her trapped. Awareness felt like reopening old wounds, but it also felt honest. Her first acts of rebellion were tiny and terrifying. She declined an invitation without offering an excuse. She spoke up in a meeting, her voice shaking but steady enough. She allowed herself to rest without calling it laziness. Each small choice sent a ripple of fear through her, followed closely by an unfamiliar sense of relief. The world did not end when she asserted herself. People did not abandon her. Some were surprised, some were uncomfortable, but she remained standing. As she practiced listening to herself, emotions she had buried began to surface. Anger, grief, disappointment, and longing all demanded attention at once. There were days she cried, without knowing exactly why, days she felt raw and exposed. Healing, she learned, was not gentle at first. It was messy and exhausting and often lonely, but unlike her silent suffering, this pain felt purposeful. It was pain that moved, that shifted, that led somewhere. She began to rewrite the story she told herself about strength. Strength, she realized, was not about enduring everything alone. It was about honesty. It was about choosing yourself even when it felt selfish. It was about letting your voice tremble and speak anyway. This new definition frightened her because it required visibility. It required risk. Silence had always felt safer, but it had also kept her small. Slowly, her life started to change in ways she could not have planned. She pursued interests she had once dismissed as impractical. She distanced herself from relationships that thrived on her self and neglect. She sought spaces where she could be both capable and human, both strong and vulnerable. With each decision, she felt herself stepping closer to the center of her own life. Her comeback was not instant, and it was not perfect. There were setbacks, moments when old habits resurfaced and fear whispered that silence would be easier. But now she recognized that voice for what it was, a remnant of survival, not a guide for growth. Each time she chose differently, her confidence grew a little louder. People began to notice the change, not because she announced it, but because she no longer hid. She spoke with clarity. She took up space without apology. She laughed more freely, her joy no longer muted by guilt. The same world that once overlooked her now paused to pay attention. Some admired her transformation. Others felt unsettled by it. She accepted both reactions as evidence that she was finally being seen. Her pain had been silent for so long that even she had underestimated it. But her comeback carried the weight of every unspoken word, every swallowed tear. Every night she convinced herself to keep going. It was loud not because she shouted, but because it was undeniable. It echoed in the way she lived, the way she chose herself, the way she refused to disappear again. She understood now that healing did not erase her past, it honored it. Every quiet struggle had taught her empathy. Every lonely moment had built her depth. She was not ashamed of the girl who survived in silence. She was grateful to her, but she no longer needed to live that way. Her story became a reminder to herself and to others that silence is not the same as peace, and loudness is not always noise. Sometimes a loud comeback is simply a life lived honestly, a voice reclaimed, a self finally allowed to exist fully. And this time, she did not fade into the background. This time she stood at the center of her own story, unafraid to be heard.